Layman's Terms with Guy Nohra. Our guest today is Matt Palumbo. I am very, very excited about talking to him. Um, if you've noticed recently, there's been a lot of talk about billionaires. Everyone wants to talk about billionaires. So we have the expert on one particular billionaire. And I'm really, really excited about this because I think, well, first of all, Matt is a very successful author. The Man Behind the Curtain is a book that he wrote, and he's got now one called The Heir, which I'll put all these pieces together for you, and you'll understand, what this is all about. But Matt, before I do this, I'd love to hear about your journey, how you got to where you are today. You can start anytime you want, and then we'll get into the subject matter. And as we're discussing, every once in a while, I'll interrupt just so that we can clarify for the layman, because you're an expert on it. I'm kind of wonkish about it, but our audience is just you know normal people who just want to learn as much as they can without having to do all the research that we have. So first, let me ask you: are you still in middle school? You are the youngest. You know, you for your age, you are widely successful. So I'm going to start with that.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. I was told beforehand I would like you a lot, so I think that's good news to hear. I'm 31, but I've gone on Fox before, and people have messaged me like, "Why are they letting kids on Fox now?" And I'm thinking, like, I don't know. I guess it's a good thing. I guess I'll age, as such that I'll always look younger, hopefully. But I
It's a great
started,
thing.
huh?
It's a great thing.
Exactly. But I did start getting into politics in middle school, just in the form of watching Bill O'Reilly with my dad every night. And it was more of like a bonding activity. I didn't really have that many opinions or even, know how to think about politics, which I think took many, many years of reading and just listening to other people that, way smarter than me before I felt like I had any ideas of my own. So I sort of moved on to watching Glenn Beck as early as when he was on CNN, and then he moved to Fox. And for, I think it was many months, he started going after George Soros and explaining all his networks. And that's what put the idea for The Man Behind the Curtain in my head, which was 11 years later I started writing it. But that's where I got that idea from. And then once he was off Fox, I just I'd read everything Thomas Sowell had to say. I got really into economics and Milton Friedman, all those people for a while, and I just sort of devoured every single book I could find. I was reading Paul Krugman and Naomi Klein and all those people who, even in high school, I didn't think were very impressive, and kind of felt like I could refute them on certain things. I learned how people lied with statistics very early. How narratives were blown up, and things like journalists, where it seems like journalists are sort of all in one chat room or a group chat coordinating, and it turns out they actually are when you start. One of the ways I realized was when they all start using a new term all at once, that has to be coordinated. Language doesn't evolve that quickly. So I just, started developing an obsession with all of this. I went to college at the College of New Jersey. I studied finance, and my logic was the odds of me actually succeeding in politics and, do I really think I'm going to be on TV one day were zero. And there was a job interview I did in December of 2015 with, I think it was with Bloomberg, actually. And they asked me, well, we Googled you and you have a lot of political writing. You have two books out. I had two at the time that were self-published. Why are you applying here? And I said, my ideal job would be some sort of TV pundit, but there's not really an application process for that. And, you really think that if I'm competing with kids from the Ivy League, I'm going to beat them. And I think it was 9 months after that, Fox started inviting me on. So it aged poorly in a very, very good way. But the pivotal moment for me was meeting Dan Bongino when I was 19 years old. I was finishing up the night shift at Dunkin' Donuts, and no one comes in. So I was watching a documentary by Robert Reich called Inequality for All. And every 10 minutes, I'm thinking, well, that doesn't seem quite right. Or I know for a fact this isn't true. And I was just writing this all down. So then I went home, broke open the laptop, and typed it up into an article, a website called Rare. I think it was Rare Magazine or Rare published it. I don't think they're around anymore. But then the next day, I got a tweet from Bongino was saying, this is a great job from Matt Palumbo. And he started following me and promoting my work. And I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. I think he was a guest host for Levin and Hannity at the time. So I'm like, well, that's a pretty big deal. And I think it was just after I turned 21, I drove down to DC and we did a show together and we stayed in touch. And the thing about writing is the work comes and goes. So I was writing every day for a while. I worked for Alan West out of college, did writing for him. And then Facebook started killing political content. So I found a job that paid a lot less, but it was still writing. And then same thing happened there. That a lot of these sites just can't support themselves without investor money. So I was like, all right. So I took a job at PNC as a bank teller, and it was a very small branch that specialized in business clients. And one of the consequences of that is there's just not a lot of people coming in. So during my downtime, I would, write whatever I can, and it would usually end up I'd make more from writing than I was sitting there all day at PNC. So that was well, and then they were going to promote me to some sort of banker position, but the thing about the banking industry is they throw out titles that mean nothing. Like, you can go to a bank branch and every teller is a VP somehow, and it means nothing. But I was going to get some slight promotion, have my own cubicle and all that. And then a week or two before that, Dan Bongino calls me up. I'm in the middle of the shift. I answer anyway. And he goes, hey, I'm starting a website called BonginoReport.com. You're going to run it. And I said, sounds good. So I've been doing that for 5 years and change. And then I do little articles for his newsletter, and they have to be finished by a certain time. So they're usually, much shorter sort of Democrats making fools of themselves style articles, because I just don't have time to do a long form piece on that time limit. But that's mostly my day. And still, I still looking for more writing work always. When I was writing the Alex Soros book, I think I put 400 or so hours into it over a pretty short time frame, and the whole time I was just fantasizing, I can't wait to do nothing. And within a week of doing nothing, I'm like, this sucks. I need to start writing again. So the fun never really ends. But I should go back and say I'm doing this all out of order, but I think it works. The George Soros book got published in 2022, and that was sort of a breakthrough moment for me, and that's what started getting me invited on Fox. And specifically, it was because actually a year after it was published, the New York Post asked me to do a 5-part series based on the book. So I submitted all of them, and they didn't tell me that it was going to be a front cover story. So I wake up for the next day, and the text, a buddy of mine says, "You're a badass." And I'm like, what the hell did I do? And then he sends me the cover, and I'm like, holy crap. And then Fox starts inviting me on. The first show I did was at like 3 a.m. I woke up for Fox and First, I think it was. And one of the clips from there got shared by Benny Johnson, and then Donald Trump Jr. shared it. And I think it has 50 million views between all platforms. And it's one of those clips that just goes viral perpetually. And whenever I see an uptick in sales, I just know it's somewhere. So it's pretty cool to see that. And it let me meet a lot of very interesting people. For instance, there was a part of the book where I was talking about Soros infiltrating Albanian politics, and there was one politician in particular I talked about, kind of his back and forth with Soros and how Soros manufactured certain controversies about him. And I guess I guess they have Google alerts or something where he found out about it. And I wrote an article where, the threshold to get into the New York Times bestseller list, I think, is 5,000 or so books the first week, and I sold at least double that. So I did an article about how I got snubbed, which was a net positive because I got more people to buy it. So, it ended up working out for me. But so I get a text from someone that just says, "Hey, the president of Albania is talking about you on TV." And I'm like, "What? Are you sure?" So they send me the clip, and he's like, "This was a great book, and it should have been a bestseller." And I'm like, "It's so cool. This guy's just sticking up for me." I have no idea who he was. So I went to Albania, met him. I think met 4 times over a week, and he got me in some shows there to talk politics. And I'm probably going back in July. He asked me to be his biographer. So I'm like, it's just crazy the opportunities that came out of this one book. And then, it was, I think, a week before Alex took over. I was on Varney, and we were talking about what's going to come next. And I predicted, well, Alex Soros is going to take over. And then I think it was the next week I was on. And as I'm leaving the studio, the notification came through. And I'm like, I finally got something right in politics for once. But he knows who I am for sure, because when I was in Albania, and this is one of those where, living in a simulation moments, he was in the same hotel I was at. And
Oh my gosh.
the people, back at the front desk, I'm like, can you tell me what room he's in so I can give him a copy of the book? And I was just going to troll, and then leave. But he's like, I can't tell you that. And, it's a corrupt country. So I slipped him $20. He was like, all right, 9th floor. So I'm like going up to the 9th floor, and I'm thinking in my head, what is my strategy here? Am I going to knock on every single door? They're going to answer, not speak English. And I go, okay, bye. So anyway, I go up to the 9th floor. The door is open. There's like 4 or 5 bouncer looking guys outside one room, and they look towards me. And then I just pressed the lobby button and got the hell out of there. So that was one funny moment. And then I had a friend there. She was helping me get on a lot of the TV shows to talk about Soros and other stuff. And she knew every politician, even those in the Socialist Party, but obviously everyone in the right-wing party, which is ironically called the Democratic Party, but it's not pro-Democrat. So she texts the mayor of Tirana, who's now in jail, but was notoriously corrupt, but he's very good friends with Alex. And he has on Twitter and Instagram called Alex his brother, as has the prime minister of Albania, and texted him like, we should get a meeting between Matt and Alex. And he's like, yeah, that's a hilarious idea. I'll pass it on. And nothing's happened. And then as I was writing this book, I found his chief of staff's email. And it took me at least, I don't know, 50 attempts to get someone to respond to me. And then I finally just called them, and I was like, hey, this is Matt Palumbo. You know me from this, and this. And I could so tell they did not like me at all. It was so obvious. Like when I hung up, I was like, all right, you've been helpful. Have a great day. And it just clicked on me. And I'm like, all right, of course. So then after that, his chief of staff got back to me and said, Alex isn't doing interviews, but if you want to send us a copy, we'll be happy to fact check it for you. And I'm like, well, you want to get ahead of the book. I'm not stupid. But I didn't say that. So I wrote back, well, if you will answer me a dozen questions, and you don't have to answer them all. In fact, if you don't answer them, I won't even include it in the book. I was lying. I was totally going to say they refused to answer, but I said, I won't include it in the book. And she would just dodge the question and keep asking for the book. So I'm like, I was just going to give up. And then a month or two comes by, and an interview with Alex gets released. And most of it was the month she told me he wasn't doing interviews. So I just sent back that, and I'm like, what is this? And then she's never responded to me since. So every time I do an interview, I forward it to her. No response. Once the book is out, I'm going to email her and tell her if anyone at the OSF wants to buy it in bulk, I'll get them a good deal, and I'll sign them for them. But that's coming in 8 or 9 months. So I'm looking forward to that. And I am very proud of myself because I've been researching SEO. And apparently if you link a lot of like an Amazon listing in articles, it helps it move up in Google. So I went through 200 articles of mine, and it took me less than maybe an hour and a half. And I just put 2 links in every single article. And within 2 days, it's now one of the top results on the first page. So I'm going to try to get it even higher, but he cannot escape me.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to help you after today as well.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to go on a quick tangent.
Go for it. I do that a lot.
I am so proud of Dan Bongino for giving up an amazing gig to serve. To me, that's what being a real American is all about. And I know you know him, so I just wanted to say that. But now let's hit on so of course again I'm a wonk, so George Soros followed the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, tell us you're now going to get into the psychology of the guy too at some point, but tell us exactly what is he up to and why. And then if you don't mind, I will be interrupting because
No, of course.
again I want to make sure people understand what we're saying.
Well, I'll actually start post him handing over control to Alex, because he is still doing politics behind the scenes, or I said even behind the scenes. It's actually public. I don't know what I'm saying. He still runs his hedge fund, Soros Fund Management, which is the second best performing hedge fund in the history of finance. A little suspicious there, by the way. He's been convicted of insider trading in France, and I'm assuming he must use his political leverage to his benefit. But
Of
how could
course.
he not? I mean, he's using it in
Of
every
course.
other way. You think he wouldn't in finance? But he acquired Odyssey, which owns a couple hundred stations, many right wing, and it was right ahead of the election, so you could silence right wing voices, promote left wing ones to try to swing the result. Did not work. But he did not go through all the correct regulatory procedures, and this coincides with his son visiting the White House over 30 times. And a current FCC chair says, yeah, this was unheard of what happened there. He also purchased Radio Mambi, which was a Hispanic or Latino conservative network, so we could turn it left wing. And he also purchased Crooked Media recently, which owns Pod Save America and a bunch of other podcasts I've never heard of. But these are all media investments, and he's tried to play it off as just being to make money. But media investments are actually usually terrible investments, so very capital intensive, and it's very difficult to make money at. But
Yeah.
he's been doing that behind the scenes. But his start in politics, and this plays into him doing it for personal gain as well as his God complex that we'll get into, was in post-Soviet countries when they were transitioning to capitalism. And there is the question of, well, what happens with all these state-owned assets? And many of them got sold off. He was able to use his connections to buy many for pennies on the dollar. And he still maintains a lot of connections there. In fact, after Alex took over the OSF, there were a lot of headlines that they were ceasing operations in Europe, but in reality, they were just moving them eastward into countries like Poland, Ukraine, Albania still, Belarus, although it's mainly through supporting the opposition. He can't really do much in that country, but he
Yeah.
moved eastward, and these are all countries that are known for being notoriously corrupt. And Alex himself, I would say, has to be benefiting, because Albania is one where he has the most influence through Eddie Rama, who just won his fourth term. And at the risk of rambling, I discussed in the book how a lot of Soros-funded entities went after the Albanian president I was talking about and got him criminally charged. And then there were sort of his name's Sally Berisha. There were anti and pro Berisha factions within the Democratic Party. The right-wing Democrats. So it's
Yeah.
split into multiple parties. So
Yeah.
they have a parliamentary system where you need a certain minimum number of votes to get seats at all. So many of them were so small in the last election, whatever vote they got was siphoned off from the main Democratic Party, and they got no seats. So it was like a 50-30 victory above him. But
Okay.
with George, I mean, most of his money was made through that hedge fund. That is his history. And actually, I guess to go back all the way to the beginning, the sort of Nazi story is one that a lot of people know of in some level of detail. And the left always claims in an article, oh, we've debunked this, and then they always, not even mysteriously, never actually quote the transcript of what George said in this infamous 60 Minutes interview. And it was during Nazi-occupied Hungary, he ended up becoming a courier where he would deliver deportation notices to Jews and confiscate goods, and he ended up assuming a Christian identity and staying with a guy named, I've seen some people say it was Bomb Fluss. Other sources have said it's Bomb Back, but I believe it was Bomb Fluss. And I say that because actually George's father quoted as that, but I've seen it quoted
Yeah.
elsewhere.
So but
So good.
he's actually Jewish, correct? And his
Correct.
family had to escape.
Hmm.
The why again it's not a good comparison, but I did the same thing, right? My family came here,
Hmm.
and I want nothing but to serve this country and to make it work for everybody, and I love this country and I'll die for it. Why does someone like him, what's the psychology of someone like him who does the same exact thing but actually wants to destroy our fabric? Again, the rumors I heard from somebody in Hungary was that his dad was a communist and he's a communist, and at the end of the day he wants to destroy capitalism, which is kind of weird, but
So I read his father's autobiography. It was called Masquerade, and it talks a lot about the Nazi occupation and that George actually seemed to enjoy delivering these notices and all that. So it completely blows up any claims about anything the media says otherwise. But George, when he went to the London School of Economics, he studied under a guy named Karl Popper. He had this idea of a so-called open society. And in my opinion, his interpretation is not really that accurate, of what a society that embodies freedom and liberty is supposed to actually entail. And I say that because George has said that the U.S. embodies the opposite of those principles. And after he moved to the U.S., he just wanted to make money and leave, which he never did. But in Karl Popper's writings, he said that, the U.S. perfectly embodies the principles he supports. So maybe it's a miscommunication. I would be surprised if I understood it more than the guy who studied under him. But that's what it is. And the guy has a God complex. In fact, I started the last book with a quote that says, my goal is to become the conscience of the world. There's a famous article, and I believe the New Yorker, where he said he had a God complex and sees himself as a god despite not being religious himself. He's ethnically Jewish.
yeah.
And when it comes to the question of why does he do this stuff, I think the simplified answer is because he can. I guess a more intellectual answer would be maybe he wants to reorganize society after kind of burning it down to the ground. And, we see groups like Black Lives Matter, and I don't think he's funded the parent organization, but he's funded adjacent groups that you can read what they support, and it is basically identical. And they are more literally want to do that. And of course, they're aligned with him. But the psychology is, I've sort of joked, I can't get inside the guy's head because I'm not also a psychopath. But I think that might be an okay answer.
Well, because the things. So again, from the outside looking in, and I don't have your expertise on him. So this is the guy who, for some reason, is the opposite of what I stand for, which is the American
Me
dream.
too.
He wants to bring down everything that we have. But then where I get very concerned is that his ROI on his political involvement is incredibly high because of that whole DA business.
Yes.
So you can spend, I'll spend a whole bunch of money to get a senator elected, 80 million, whatever it is. He just gets a bunch of DAs and spends a fraction of that. And next thing you know, felons are on the street, criminals are doing whatever they want, and so from an ROI perspective, I guess he's a very successful investor, but also an incredibly successful political player, because he gets to do this. And let's look at LA and San Francisco and New York, all these DAs, St. Louis, that was all him. And the places only got worse and more dangerous, and they all got recalled because he just overplayed his hand.
Yeah, the one that got recalled that comes to mind is Chase Abuadin in San Francisco, and it was so humiliating for them that they tried to claim he had never funded them in the first place. So he went to the OSF pointed to a group called Influence Watch, which did not list him on their database as being Soros funded and said, see, this right-wing group said he's not Soros funded. But Influence Watch is owned by a company called the Capital Research Center. And then they wrote an article that was like, no, he's totally Soros funded. It doesn't, he should have been on the list. So
Yeah.
they debunked him quite quickly there. And it's the same exact story, no matter where you go. It's things like enforcement of drugs in public specifically, prostitution go down, criminals are let free, like they enter them into diversion programs. There was one DA, I'm blanking on the name, but they had it where your charges could be dropped if you just watched a 1-hour video. And I'm like, well, I guess when you get charged again, they do the same thing. I mean, that was the problem with all these second chances is if you get a second chance, you usually don't have a criminal record. So when you get another crime, you get a second chance and the record's abolished and so on and so forth. And it's not even just switching from tough on crime to weak on crime. They can also just choose which laws to enforce and not enforce as opposed to changing them. There was a DA in, I believe it was Oakland. If not Oakland, it was California, of course, where Diane Becton was the name. And she made it so vandalism or graffiti was not a crime you could really get charged with. So you spray paint somewhere, you get caught, nothing happens. There was a couple that vandalized a Black Lives Matter mural, and they got slapped with hate crime charges, vandalism charges, etc. So it's all made up. There was one that Alex got elected named Mary Moriarty. It was the one where a Tim Walz employee was keying Tesla cars and it was 20,000+ in damage.
I remember that.
So it was a Wednesday that she announced, we're not going to be going forward with this. He'll have to pay restitution, which he's never going to pay. I mean, the legal fees to collect are probably going to be half of what he owes, and on a per person basis, it won't be worth it. But it was the Monday before that, literally 2 days before, she announced she was charging someone for keying a car at a Denny's, like some 19-year-old girl. And the amount of damage was, I think, 6,000 versus 20,000+. So again, it's what laws get enforced are just as important as are they, or actually probably more important as are they weak or tough. And a lot of other DAs he has funded are just going after Trump with lawfare. I mean, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg. I mean, James is still going after him, even though I guess she was projecting with those charges she picked. But another one that I highlight in the book is, his name is Eric Trier. He's not a household name, but he's relevant because there was a DA named Kim Ogg. She became the Harris County DA. Soros funded by a lot of money, but she wasn't radical before getting the money, which is basically everyone except her has been publicly insane before getting money. That's why he funded them. But this is one where he funded her to try to get her to change, to become what he wanted. And she implemented these very low-level, weak-on-crime policies, like, just letting people off, not, without bail or on lowered bail. And crime went up, and she reversed it immediately. And then ended up at one point prosecuting a Soros judge. So clearly there was something that happened between them where she's going, I'm not doing all this stuff for you guys. So and actually she has since endorsed Ted Cruz and told people not to support Democrat judges, even though she's a Democrat. So something happened where she kind of went, all right, screw these people. I'm going scorched earth on Soros. So Alex Soros, the guy funded the Chantier guy, he primaries Kim Ogg, beats her by, I think, 75-25. He goes against the Republican, wins in like a 51-49 slim victory. And within a week, or no, it was the week he was getting sworn in, it turned out he forgot to renew his law license. So they had to retroactively reinstate him before swearing him in. So that's the kind of clown that Alex is funding. But, the headline is Alex Soros DA defeats George Soros DA, if you can believe it.
Yeah. Again, amazing. So if we summarize your book, The Man Behind the Curtain, for our audience, how would we explain that to them so that they understand the severity, but also the wide influence that this man has, and we all know he has nefarious you know ends. You know, he's looking to I don't know, change everything in the greatest country on earth. But back to the book. The man behind the curtain. So you just meet somebody in another country, and they go, "What do you do?" You're on a train. You say, "Oh, I write books. Tell me about your book." "I wrote a book called "The Man Behind the Curtain" about George Soros." "Oh, tell me about it." You know. So
All right. Well, it's one of those issues where you can read a deranged comment on a YouTube video about this guy controlling everything, and it's 98% correct. He really has captured a lot of major institutions, and the media is one that I talk about. Where if you look at people who were executives or worked to Soros funded or founded organizations to some degree, and then went on to serve on the boards of major media companies or newspapers, it is basically every single place you could think of. And, a lot of these groups, too, were left wing to begin with. So it's just amplifying a message. And that's why you
yeah,
never see George Soros criticized, or they only run so called fact checks. And in
yeah,
fact, it's factcheck.org, or no, PolitiFact is owned by the Poynter Institute, which is funded by George Soros. And if you want to see, if you see in the book, okay, I'm saying this institution, this paper or media organization is compromised by Soros, type his name in the search bar on their website, and it is covering for the guy, never reporting anything negative, claiming it's a conspiracy without really diving in. And conspiracy is just a pejorative. I mean, there
yeah.
are conspiracies that are true. I mean, a
Sure,
conspiracy is just when an organization or a group of people plan something. It happens all the time. But also, it is our politicians are captured by him, and people like Alex Soros. And this doesn't relate to the last book. Well, actually, it does in the sense that Alex Soros posts photos with them publicly, but these are all connections his father made, so he was doing the same thing behind the
sure.
curtain, if you will. But Alex has posted photos of hundreds of people, and it made the second book easy because I would see, like, okay, he's posing with the Prime Minister of North Macedonia. Let's find every resource on George there. And there was always this trail leading up to Alex then taking over. I'm trying to think what else in the book. Even, even certain universities are compromised by Soros. He runs Central European University, or founded it. Alex is actually the chairman of the board. They have a group called the Open Society Foundation Network, and it partners with colleges all around the world to spread their vision. One of them is Al-Quds University in Jerusalem, which has had events where Islamic Jihad, take a wild guess at what they believe, has held rallies at their college where they're doing Nazi salutes, and not the Elon Musk kind, the actual Nazi salute. And they have remained partners with them. Faculty at that college have supported. They've had days celebrating certain so-called Palestinian martyrs that have killed people. So they're partnered with legitimately insane people. But they I will say, to be fair, a lot of the insanity they push has become normalized everywhere else. The America is evil, genocide of the natives, white privilege, etc., etc. And where else in the book could I even go into? And it extends outside of the U.S. He has compromised European politics. There was a leaked memo from 2018 which listed all allies that George had within European Parliament, and if they were all one political party, like they just call them the Soros party, they would have been the largest political party in the entire parliament. And then if you factor out, like, well, they would have changed parties, so it would have subtracted from the main party. It's even by a much wider margin. So they're not all still in office, but Alex has inherited that, and he is active in Eastern European politics. Even with Ukraine, I mean, George he funded the Maidan protest in Ukraine.
Yeah,
Granted,
yeah,
a lot of people did, but he benefited the most in that after Petro Poroshenko got elected, Alex was awarded the highest honor in the land. One of the top newspapers there said he was the second most influential person in the country after Poroshenko. He got appointed to the National Investment Board, which Zelensky now chairs. There's been no reports of Georgia leaving, and you stay on it between presidents, so he presumably
yeah.
is still part of it. And then Alex now he donated $1 million to a charity of Zelensky's wife. He's been shaking hands with Zelensky. He brokered. There was a very suspicious munitions deal between Ukraine and Albania, which Alex has the most influence in, where it was all these munitions that Albania was supposed to produce that they did not have the capacity to produce, so they're just outsourcing it. And it's like, well, why would you go to them first if they're then going to find a partner and pocket a fee? It only makes sense if Alex was playing some kind of role. So I am kind of rambling all over the place, but I guess the sort of one
No,
sentence is he really does control everything to
It,
some.
no, it makes a lot of sense, and I think when people listen to this, I want them to really focus on what we're saying, because you see that the next step to everything we're discussing now is like, oh, you guys are conspiracy theorists, he's just a philanthropist. Uh, we have to push back against
Yeah.
this because uh, I know, I mean, even, fine. Bill Gates is a philanthropist and he's spending his money on vaccines or whatever he's doing. But nobody to me is as uh, driven to change political systems as that particular philanthropist. So how do we fight back this perception? Which, by the way, we're running against the tide here because everybody thinks that at least on the left, he's great. That we're not conspiracy theorists. That we're actually genuinely concerned Americans and really generally concerned developed world people, and now generally concerned for Eastern Europe, which is finding a stride and actually almost morally and values wise better than Western Europe. So he's going to pollute that too.
Yeah, I always
So,
say I'm a conspiracy factist, so which sounds much better than theorist.
okay.
Well, I just don't care what they say. Ultimately, I mean, it's just a pejorative to say don't look at what these people have to say. I mean, the lab leak people were conspiracy theorists, the vaccine people were conspiracy theorists. Sometimes they're right. I mean, a lot of the time they're wrong, of course, but they're also right sometimes, and they get this. It's just an easy way to dismiss them. All the evidence is already out there if you do look for it. There's plenty of websites that track everything he does. I mean, in addition to my book, Newsbusters does a great job, Influence Watch. There's others I could think of, but there's a lot of places. I mean, even mainstream places like Fox or the New York Post, they have articles documenting this, and I've never seen it refuted. In fact, the only time the Open Society Foundation puts out press releases, and this relates to what I said earlier, they never address what they're actually debunking. It's as if their press releases are just directed to their donors. But they denied taking money from USAID and took $270 million. In fact, you can go on USAID when you used to be able to go on their website and search grants. That Central European University I mentioned earlier still had a $1 million grant outstanding. And so it's just they'll call you a conspiracy theorist just for documenting exactly what they do. So maybe just people like me should more. Well, I don't even know what to say. I feel like I do lead with the evidence, and
Yes.
even when I have it laid out, there's always one person saying it's either a conspiracy or an anti-Semitic conspiracy, which is a favorite of theirs, but means nothing coming from them at this point. It's just a smear.
And again, to me, the breadth of the tentacles
Mhm.
of his organizations. I'm on a radio show with Steve Sanchez, which is Odyssey, and I remember when he bought Odyssey, he bought 45% or some number. You're like a controlling
It was
number.
like
I remember,
it wasn't the full amount, but then he bought a ton of bonds that I think might have been convertible. So
yeah,
it was de
because they were in
facto
bankruptcy.
control. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember telling Steve what's going to happen because
Mhm.
it's obvious what this guy's trying to do. He's going to undermine all of these conservative talk shows and conservative radios, and luckily so far. And I said, keep your eyes open. Everybody has to keep their eyes open. I've been on boards myself. I understand how boards work. So we need to be very vigilant. But so far, nothing. But I don't have any qualms that at
Mhm.
some point, he knows the opposition. He
Mhm.
knows that we're strongest in talk radio. He knows that we control now a lot social media and podcasting and so on. And he's going to try to infiltrate
Mhm.
and change that dynamic. Luckily, maybe he learned something at the London School of Economics. This is a free market in the United States, and people go where they want. People are going to listen to our show and make their own conclusions rather than get manipulated by him. As you said, he's pretty much preaching to the choir
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. So it's just that I think now that people like you have exposed him,
Mhm.
I think the rest of us, without looking again like like conspiracy, antennas on on our heads kind of things, we just have to just stop a lot of the things that he's doing. And I'm amazed about the worldwide. Uh, I'm partly from Lebanon
Mhm.
and came here when I was 15. There's an NGO in Lebanon that he supports,
Mhm.
and it's this kind of very complex politics over there. But it's this group that supposedly, they're the new generation of politicians, and they're going to do things differently,
Mhm.
but
Sure they
they
are.
end up being as bad as everybody else, as corrupt as everybody else, and he's involved there. So just imagine that there are no limits to where the guy wants to play, for lack of a better word. And again, what do you attribute that to? It's just like the
Yeah.
God syndrome. I'm going to change the world because I am who I am.
Yeah, it's a world domination agenda, and the ROI. I mean, I haven't ran the numbers, but it has to be higher than on the DAs. If 40 million on DAs versus 40 million in an African country where the average person is living on a couple of grand a year, it's got to be massive. And there's no reason to fund these political groups unless they are going to be corrupt, or else he doesn't benefit. I mean, Eddie
Yeah.
Rama, who's Alex's best friend, has regarded as one of the most corrupt people in that region, and narco trafficking has very not coincidentally exploded under him. So he doesn't really care. Now there may be a few legitimate charitable groups sprinkled in there, like with
Yeah.
USAID. There were some groups that
Sure.
actually were fine, and I believe the State Department even preserved those. It's just the ones I call it the transgender Vietnamese dance therapy category of what it's like the Mad Libs projects. Those are the ones where it's a lot of meddling, or in Latin America, he's funded legal groups that are representing migrants who are trying to cross the border under Biden and stuff.
Sure.
So, a
Sure.
lot of things are just not really what they seem to be. And USAID was a group where in 2009, under Obama, George Soros was instrumental in getting the rules changed on what you had to do to get aid. And it was things like you have to adopt a slate of progressive political opinions. And, there are people in Uganda who are like, why the hell do we have to support transgenderism to get a well built? But that was what people were
Yeah.
wondering. And it really just goes to show that even something where it is a legitimate charitable thing, let's say
Yeah.
helping an infrastructure project in a third world country or helping get water to somewhere, even those have to be corrupted in some way, no matter how impractical it is.
So they co-opt everything.
Mhm.
And would it be fair to say that their agenda is A, make money,
Mhm.
B, push an incredibly, it's not even progressive, like a revolutionary
Mhm.
agenda worldwide? Is that is that
Pretty
is that
much.
what you,
Yeah, I
that's
would
what
say
we're gonna?
that. I mean, even when George donated, it was 20 plus billion to the OSF in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
That was in the news. Of course, it was a big charitable endeavor, but it also gave him one of the biggest tax write-offs, I think, in world history under that deduction. And then, of all the funds donated, I mean, a lot of it is stocks. Most of it was stocks. So
Yeah.
all of the capital gains, all of a sudden, are not taxed. So it
Yeah.
was one of the biggest double tax write-offs in probably the history of this country. And of course, it's celebrated as this guy just wants to help people.
And one more time, the guy who wants to destroy the system is abusing the system.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, so I know you want to talk about your next book with Alex here. So I hope let's conclude with George. So just give me your conclusion with George for our listeners, and then let's hit on Alex because I have some thoughts there too. So
I can confidently say he's a bad dude, but I mean, if you look at lifespan statistics, he probably will pass on in the next couple of years.
yeah,
Although they say the good only the what is only the good die young, so perhaps maybe he's going to live forever. I don't know.
there's a
Uh,
saying in Italian and I don't know how to say it in Italian, but it's like the bad weeds never die.
Yeah. So, all right. So, yeah, he'll be eternal, but hopefully we'll take a back seat.
Yeah, yeah,
I imagine he's whispering in Alex's ear here and there, but I've seen him speak recently, and he does not seem good. He's almost as bad as talking now as Alex is. So, not looking.
okay.
If you've ever seen Alex speak, it is. It's like someone said it's like hearing a record skip, but the talking version. The guy cannot get a word out. I don't know why they picked him just for that reason, in fact.
Yeah,
But yeah, to summarize on George, pretty much everything you see about the guy is true. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation about him too, but you can just kind of tell what it is by, a lack of punctuation in a comment or something,
So now onto the air.
Mhm.
What's your warning? What's the present? And how do people like us, how do we educate our audience again so that they're aware of it and they can make their own decision? And the rest of us have to push back because that's what we're here for.
Well, I would say at the minimum, everything is continuing on autopilot, and so it's can only get worse. Arguably, he has tried to portray himself as more moderate than his father, and had described himself as such. And then, meanwhile, is saying that Jasmine Crockett is the future of the Democratic Party. Which, God, I hope so. God, it better
Yeah.
be. I tell him that's the best idea ever. And he's claimed that the left has so in addition to like him saying the left has gone kind of crazy on the free speech issue, he has tried to appear more moderate on Israel. He's criticized Israel, but has said he supports a two-state solution and all that. But he's still funding all the groups that are behind these campus protests everywhere. He's still in partnership with Al Quds University. If there is a one free speech group he has funded, I have not seen it. And he has backed the climate radical agenda to the nth degree. In fact, that has been, since the first interviews with him over a decade ago, his one top issue. And the OSF from 2016, which is the first year they give you grant data for some reason, up until he took over, it was like 170 or so million, plus or minus a little bit here and there, spent on climate change related projects or environmental projects. And most of them, a lot are sort of umbrella groups where climate is the rallying cry, but for some reason that also means you have to support Palestine and a higher minimum wage. It's a bit schizophrenic. But just since Alex has taken over, and the spending hasn't happened yet, but just in the past 2 years, he's pledged $438 million to climate-related things, and most of it's south of the border. So it's probably going to be funding a lot of radical, left-wing groups there. And climate change is one of those things where, unfortunately, one person really can't make a difference. Like, you can flush your toilet once a week to try to save energy, but China can undo that in about 5 seconds. So what's the point? But that's his main focus. And unless he doesn't know what groups he's funding, it's really the same as his father. The only thing is he's playing a much more active role in countries like Macedonia, or North Macedonia now, Albania. To actually go on a tangent, when Macedonia wanted to enter NATO in the EU, they had a border dispute with Greece, where Greece didn't think they should be called Macedonia and would only support their ascension if they renamed the entire country North Macedonia. And Soros played a role in that, and he held bogus public polling, claiming like this huge majority of people supported it in the country. And then when the actual vote happened, people boycotted the vote, so they couldn't reach the threshold to even pass. And most people, most people even voted against it. So it was a double loss, and then they renamed it anyway. So I'm like, the guy has the power to rename countries, but when Alex posted a photo with the last left-wing prime minister who left office not too long ago, and so this was after he took over the OSF. And then he posted a photo of him and that guy, the PM, shaking hands with George Soros. And the caption of the photo was, "Happy to introduce my father to the name I can't pronounce." Meaning Alex had taken over and was making those connections himself and then introducing them to his father as opposed to the reverse. So he really has taken over everything. And I think Albania is the place to look for really how the Soros network operates, because it dates back to 1992, and I go through how they infiltrated the education system there, where a majority of schools there were the OSF run. And I talked to the former education minister, and he said they had a joke that the Department of Education was the Soros schools were the official Department of Education at that point. So, and then like the OSF played a huge role in reforming their justice system to put most state institutions in control of the Socialist Party. And it's just a really interesting chapter, just showing how the father and son, it's almost like a microcosm of how they're going to operate everywhere, how they operate everywhere. I think it was the most fun to write, just because everyone there wanted to talk to me, which I was, did wonders for my ego, not as much as, George's is big, but it was very cool.
So if someone wants to understand more how they work, you said the microcosm would be Albania.
Albania, I think. It's the longest chapter in the book, the most detail, and it was sort of the most fulfilling to write, in that nothing in it can really be found in English sources. I went through all the Albanian newspapers, and I'm fortunate that Google Chrome can translate them automatically, but it's all stuff that hasn't been reported on in US media. I have a whole section on like Bangladesh, just random countries you'd never think of. History of the Soroses, knowing the McCain family going back to the early 2000s, that I haven't really seen reported anywhere. And I don't know, I felt like I was actually discovering stuff for the first time, which I guess for a US audience I was.
That again, that's to me is a fascinating thing. It's just and again, what you're doing is so helpful, because not everybody has the time, and it's so insidious that you don't see it up front.
Yeah.
And then when you start making comments, they immediately throw you in this conspiracy group. But now, after today's show, hopefully our listeners can look at this and say, and make up their own mind, and realize that yeah, this is a bad hombre, as we say in
I love that
in
quote.
Mexico. I mean, I knew that, but just to, and I never understood it, again, given my background, how you come to the greatest place on earth, and you try to, you do the opposite. Instead of building it up and make it work, you try to break it down. So we cannot, so the nice thing about the billionaire word, and I think we're going to have to quickly go back and push back and go right to Soros when they pick on us. I know that the Democrats have run a bunch of poll and quick polls, and the word billionaire always comes up because in a very negative way, because of course of Elon Musk. So I think we have to have a counterattack, which is, as soon as they say, when Elizabeth Warren says a billionaire, Bernie Sanders, billionaire, we've got to say, can we talk about your billionaire for a second? And A, B, C, D, E, F. Our billionaire showed up for 90 days and stopped. Your billionaire has been here for 30 years and is not stopping. He's just passed the baton to his son.
It's not even him. Michael Bloomberg ran for president. He is, I think, one of the most 100 wealthiest men on the planet, if not that, in the top 200. Tom Steyer was a Democrat candidate. He's a multi-billionaire, does the climate stuff.
All about the environment. Yeah.
I mean, there's not really, and most of the billionaires are left-wing. Like Warren Buffett isn't like a far left ideologue, but whenever he talks politics, it's left-wing. Bill Gates is,
of course.
Yeah, worse, I should say.
World Economic Forum.
Yeah, World Economic Forum. Yeah. I mean, even Mark Zuckerberg up until November was, on that side. A lot of billionaires up until, just Trump took office, then decided, actually, we can work with this guy. But almost every corporation, what right-wing events are they supporting? It's always Pride Month, trans stuff. I mean, McDonald's in 2020 put out an ad from a black trans woman, meaning man, saying like, our message to cisgender people: stop killing us. I'm like, what? You make hamburgers. What are you doing? But it was every corporation up until the past year, where they realized there was a sort of a lot of fatigue on this issue, and then decided, all right, we'll pretend to not care about it and all that. And maybe they were just pretending the whole time. But every institution too, like the most random things, like theaters or scientific journals, they are, as you'd say, ideologically captured, where even if it's not billionaires, in every group, there's like this clique of insufferable left-wing people who infiltrate an organization or try to climb the ladder, or I mean, a lot of them work in HR and just try to get all these
Yeah.
policy changes made. But it's everywhere in every corporation. There is some version of that where they try to influence everything. And I think finally a lot of these useless positions are getting axed, but it really is. We've been living in like a left-wing parody universe since right before the first Trump administration, and it's finally I guess veil is getting removed, but or I
Yes.
don't know. I feel like it's finally dying down. In fact, if you looked at like the companies who used to change their logo for Pride Month, most of them are not doing it. Even Netflix isn't doing it this year, and
I know.
98% of them donate to Democrats. So the tide has shifted.
Thanks to people like you, we're seeing behind the curtain. Really, I
Yes.
mean that's the important thing, and really the silent majority is seeing behind the curtain. And the last 4 years were a disaster.
Yep.
Obviously, with regards to these issues that we're discussing, I'm not even talking about foreign relations and
Yeah.
wars and just the social issues. And I think people have woken up. And again, your work is incredibly helpful here because if some of our readers want to spend more time, they can buy your books, and really just understand the depth of this, and then they can do their own research. I always encourage. I never want people to conclude what I conclude.
Mhm.
I want them to conclude what they conclude. We just want to be here to educate and help and make it understandable in terms that they will actually, take home. But these are existential threats, like you say. Everything has been captured,
Mhm.
and I'm a venture capitalist. I was investing in
Mhm.
life sciences. Yesterday I got in a huge tiff with some of my colleagues because they were criticizing Maha with regards
Uh-huh.
to some of the, oh my God, this is flat earthers and so on, and there will never be any trust in public health. And I had to say something. I said
Yeah.
public health trust was broken when you guys masked 6 months olds,
Yeah.
when you guys made everybody take a vaccine. That's when public health was
Mhm.
broken, not when now someone is saying
Yeah.
don't put dye number 8, or someone is saying
Mhm.
let's run a vaccine trial just because the noise on autism has
Mhm.
happened. So you're right; they've captured them, and I think it's up. Really, Matt, you're a young guy, and it's up to guys like you to fight this back, and
Mhm.
and I'll do as much as I can,
Good.
because they've captured every single elitist organization, and it's a miracle
Mhm.
that we've been able to push back like we have
Yeah.
with the last, with this last election with President Trump, and I think momentum is going to be on our side. But again, you to me, you're like the Praetorian Guard intellectually of what we're trying to do. And that's why I really wanted you on the show, and so that we can actually explain this again, and to people that don't have the time or the energy to do the work that they have to do, but have to realize what's happening to us right now, and what's been happening to us through the Soroses. And I, my last comment, and I want you to finish.
Mhm.
But I've when I've seen Succession
Mhm.
in general in life, uh, version B is never as bad as version A,
That's good.
or it's so bad that it's not effective.
Okay. Well, that I like more.
so
Yeah.
so so I'm crossing my fingers a little bit
Yeah.
because we can't have another
Mhm.
30 years of what we had with George
Yeah.
Soros. You
Well,
know,
I mean, as I mentioned, he's not a compelling speaker or figure. Like, if he were to give a public speech, it would probably, I don't know, it would be widely mocked every time he speaks. Like, it's so bad. I thought, like, if I ever meet him, I would pro bono offer him speaking lessons because I don't want to have to listen to it for 30 years. But his political acumen is legitimately terrible. I mean, he was backing Biden through even after the debate disaster, predicting he would still win. The second Kamala Harris becomes the nominee, it's the most brilliant decision ever. He supports her. He predicted on election day she would win every single swing state, so he got every single state wrong. And then after the election, he pens some op-ed on, well, of course Trump won. I mean, look at the political environment. And I'm thinking, like, who are you fooling? I can just read your tweets. And he just is not as political. Like, I guess I'm judging him as a pundit in that regard, not as, an influence, someone, influencing behind the scenes in a way that he can benefit from. But he just does not seem to be that bright in, having his finger on the national pulse, because every data point, I mean, Biden's internal polling, and we didn't even learn this until after the election from John Favreau, who was an Obama speechwriter. But he saw the internal polling and said Trump was going to win above 400 electoral votes after that debate. So when they say like Kamala Harris didn't have time to do her campaign, first of all, she was an improvement of what was going to happen, and B, the more she talks, the less people liked her. That's why they didn't let her talk. So neither argument made sense. But that was the kind of stuff that Alex was pushing, and I don't know. He just doesn't seem. I mean, I'm sure he can't be dumb, but I just don't think I think he's in over his head in many ways.
Yeah, you're correct. I think a lot of times. This is a financier trait, by the way. Financiers always are right, even when they're wrong, because they spin the story post facto. Hey, I was at that board meeting and I said we shouldn't buy these radio stations, but no one's there to prove it. Meanwhile, he bought the radio stations. So this is very common in financiers. That's a free tip for you from me. Financiers are always right, no matter even when they're wrong.
It's the same with politicians. So
we call it on the politicians. The other guys stay behind the scenes. So Matt, parting words. First of all, thank you so much. The second thing is, I would love. Where are you based?
I'm in New Jersey, actually. Everyone thinks D.C. or New York, but I'm close enough to New York where I can go into Fox or whatever when needed.
When I make it to one of these two places, I would love to buy you a beer and just have a good time.
I'm in.
Just talking about not just this, but everything else, because we're very aligned, and I think you have a great future.
Thank you.
And anything I can do to help, please let me know.
I'll have some venture capital questions after the show. I'm very interested in finance and all that, and
of course,
cool.
And obviously 35 years of that. So
good.
And I can also be your alter ego doctor, because I've seen every deal possible with every disease over the last 35 years. So
very good.
But what are your parting words? What would you say? Again, so our audience today is gonna go, oh my gosh, George Soros. This is what he's been doing all these years, and now we have a son who's going to do the same thing. So, what are your parting words for our audience?
Well, I hate to end on a book plug, but one thing I've found is difficult about kind of promoting a book this far out, which is out in December, is no one really likes to pre-order anything. So, I guess my suggestion would be either do it anyway or just put it in your cart for my ego's sake. That would help me a lot. But no, the book itself is, I think, I don't know, I think, and it's almost creepy that I probably know more about Alex Soros than everyone except his family, but it is an extremely comprehensive book, and it's actually longer than my book about George, which it required a lot of original research and just going through thousands of grants, where with the George book there was so much published about him that with one click I could read an executive summary and go, oh cool, this saves me 100 hours of work. But this one probably took, I would say, 400 to 500 hours in total, and there were parts where I felt like I was going insane, but it was 100% worth it.
Know thy adversary, and you have to do the scouting. And as you said, they're not going anywhere, and we have a big fight ahead of us. And again, the more we know them, the more we can blunt their efforts. And I think that's really all about for us. And again, for our listeners, it's just learn, find out what's going on in this world, because it will have an influence on you, and has had an influence on you over the last 10 years, if not more.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I just think people are really going to enjoy it. So,
good.
That's all I got.
Well, so I'll definitely buy the book. Pre-order it on Amazon, so I'll be one of your fans, and
Thank you,
then
sir.
and I'm very serious about getting together. If you
That would be
come in
awesome.
this
Where are you
direction,
based out of now?
I'm in Reno, Nevada,
Okay,
uh,
all right. So
but
we can go to Vegas.
I go to Vegas all the time because
Awesome. I
when I
love
ran for
poker. So
when I ran for governor, I had to spend all my time in Clark County, so
neat.
that's where all the votes
Yeah,
are. So I
yeah. I'm
very
running for
very
office myself right now, but it's my district is 300 people.
and
It's I'm
what
running to get on the Republican County Committee. My wife is running unopposed, so she has it easy. But the real reason I'm running is the mayor of my town really doesn't like me. We've like clashed on certain things. A friend of mine's on the city council, and he's been like a total bully to my friends. So I've kind of pushed back on the guy, and he hates me. And I found out one of his like really close friends is on the council, or on the county committee. So I just launched a campaign against him, and it's going to be turnout of 70 people, so it's going to be who knows, but it's really a lot of fun putting up signs and having my name everywhere.
My simple advice, we call it walking in politics. So just walk, knock on doors, introduce.
I got 45 people that I knocked on said they'd vote for me, so it's even if half of them actually vote, and then the other half of people just vote like 60-40, but randomly in the first and second. I got bad ballot placement. I think that should be a victory, but the position has almost no power, so it's really just for fun.
Walking, kissing babies, shaking hands. Go to the fair, all of these things, and I think you have the personality that you will you'll turn people very quickly. So
only
good
2
luck.
people seem to not like me, so it was good odds.
And
they're a good ratio.
Their both names starts with an S. No,
that's it.
Okay. Well, Matt, thank you so much. I will definitely follow you on all the social medias as well, and I'm very serious about getting together when we get a chance.
Yep.